I just got done watching The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Powers, first 2 episodes. Thank you so much for Prime Video for sending these on over, and this will be a non-spoiler review, so you are safe here. I will be doing a spoiler review later this week, so do look out for that. Once the episodes drop, you'll be able to come over and have a great conversation in the comment section, but when it comes down to this show, I wasn't too excited. I really liked the trailers overall, but nothing really stuck out to me where I was like, this looks like that next must-watch TV series besides the visual appeal. The story-wise, I didn't know what this was really about. But after watching these first 2 episodes, I'm here to tell you, and this is, again, only for the first 2 episodes. The rest of the season could be complete crap, but the first 2 episodes are absolutely masterful, incredible, and honestly, I was in shock and awe for a majority of these 2 episodes. And one of the biggest things about that is I had to remind myself that this was not a movie. This was a TV series. And you even can go away from the visuals and the scope of this all, which we'll talk about a little bit deeper in a second. But when it comes down to the story itself, how grand and large it is, how amazing that they really bring this about. And it's a lot of story. There's still a lot going on. And we've only really scratched the surface of the second age here. But man, is it wonderful and very engaging. And the biggest thing that left me after I finished watching the second episode was, I'm intrigued. You have me on board. Let's see where the rest of the story goes. This is coming from someone who, again, did read the books when he was younger, haven't read them in years. I'm more of a movie guy than a book dude, so the movies were the one thing that I always cherish and I always go back to. But again, I'm not hugely invested into this world of Tolkien and Middle-earth itself. I'm, a novice that really loves the world and loves going back into it. But that first trilogy of movies is still some of my favorite things that I've ever watched when it comes down to the movie sphere. And those books were honestly life-changing and really one of the biggest things that really got me into books when I was younger. But to say the least is the Hobbit trilogy really did not leave me in the best mode coming out of Middle-earth. I was not the biggest fan of those movies, whatsoever. I think they're very disappointing. I've only watched 2 of them. And I didn't even finish Five Armies. I could care less at that point because I'd already read the book. I knew where it was going. But that is to say something that this show brought me back on board for Middle-earth in almost every single way and reminded me why I love this world, why I love everything that Tolkien had really created and brought to life, and I think a lot of you guys are going to be very excited for this. But what is The Rings of Power about? It's set thousands of years before the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The series is, of course, based on the author J.R.R. Tolkien's history of Middle-earth. It begins during a time of relative peace and covers all of the major events of Middle-earth's second age. I don't want to get into those because if you don't know exactly what is the things that it's covering during the Middle Age, I'm going to skip right over those. In a sense, these events take place over thousands of years in Tolkien's original stories, but are condensed down for the series, and it follows an ensemble cast of characters both familiar and new as they confront the long-feared reemergence of evil to Middle-earth. And that's all I knew going in, and that's all you really need to know going in. So, of course, the thing I do want to talk about when it comes down to the good is the one element that a lot of us are going to be talking about, is the scope of this freaking show. We've seen Game of Thrones. We've seen Mandalorian. We've seen almost every single big budget franchise have a show so far, besides, off the top of my head, the Wizarding World. Harry Potter is literally the only thing that has not had a show yet, but when we look at Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Game of Thrones, of course, when it comes down to the fantasy realm, those all have had shows. But when you watch them, I've never watched either. Game of Thrones is probably the closest to it all that has made me go, this feels like a movie. But again, it was always premiered on TV, so I've always known that to be more of a television show. And the scope of that show is grand. There's a lot of greatness to it. The visual effects, everything in Game of Thrones has always looked fantastic. But let's jump over to the actual big franchises that have gotten big shows and big things on movies as well. That is, of course, the MCU, the DC Universe, and Star Wars. Now, DC's only really tinkered with it, and they've really never given such a big budget yet. So we're going to take that one out for a second. But when we look at Marvel and Star Wars, when I watch those shows on Disney+, as much as I love them, and I enjoy a lot of them, at the end of the day, they always feel like shows. And that's really much all it is. When it comes down to the MCU, most of the time, most of those shows feel a little bit more like movies told into condensed TV series. while The Mandalorian and a couple other Star Wars series always feel like shows, and always do feel like can look like shows at times with certain spectacles here and there. If anything from that Mandalorian Season 3 teaser that we got at Star Wars Celebration is to give us any note to how big that season will be, I would still go as far to say yes, the budget clearly is way bigger for Lord of the Rings of Power, and you can definitely see in the shock and awe way that this is one of the biggest, grandest shows of all time when it comes down to overall scope. And I was in, again, awe. I loved exactly what I saw in here. From top to bottom, I was absolutely impressed in every single way, and I was honestly truly blown away by the cinematography, by the visuals here, and J.A. Bayona's direction is masterful. This feels like something that, you know, when the entire show is finally over, we're going to be able to look back and watch this before The Hobbit, before The Lord of the Rings, or even before you go back and read your books from Tolkien, and you're going to be able to go, damn, this feels perfect for what it needed to be, and again, just amazing. Like, everything here feels like the highest production you could ever get, and you feel like you are actually transitioned, transformed, and sent right into Middle-earth in such an extravagant way that I'm jealous for the people who get to watch this for the first time, because I wish I could have that same experience. The opening 20 minutes, I was completely in. And that's, again, not just because of the scope. So let's talk a little bit about the story. So the story is a lot. And that's just the truth. I think Lord of the Rings has always had a very grand scoping story. And the way that I really compare this story to is kind of how the original Game of Thrones first season was. It was a lot. Game of Thrones had many characters, many locations, and you had so much to really dive into. It wasn't about central, this one character, where if you look at House of Dragons right now, it really is just focusing on the Targaryens, a couple characters here and there, so it's a little bit more easy to get invested with what's going on in that series so far. But when it comes down to Lord of the Rings, when we look at this series, there is location here, character here, and you know, in the same way, sense and form, there's this underlying evil happening everywhere. Happening in some sense that you know, and eventually, all of this is going to tie together in some way, shape, and form. So that is the one thing that bridges it all together. But you have so many characters and so many lands to cover that it can feel like a lot. And I'll be honest, I definitely need to rewatch these episodes. I definitely need to grasp myself a little bit more on top of them, because it's a lot. And I think there's going to be people in here who do feel like it's a lot and aren't completely invested and are a little bit weirded out by the story. But when it comes down to that, you're going to find a character that you're more invested in. But the biggest pro I can give it is that there was not one boring storyline. Every time it switched around to here or there, I was truly invested. Maybe the weakest one is personally the Hobbit storyline for now, but by the end of the second episode, I was getting a little bit more invested in that and excited to see where that goes because of the way that something in there happens to connect to the other things going on. So those are things to really much look into. But your story can only be so much if you don't have amazing performances. So let's talk about the performances. Morpht Clark, I'm probably going to mispronounce some of these, so I do very much apologize, but she plays Galadriel. And I love Galadriel, I've always has, and she's phenomenal in this role. She very much embodies Galadriel in a lot of different ways, and for me, she's probably easily my favorite character in this entire show. Robert Armayo, who plays Elrond, I love him already. Like, he is really, really good. And the last big standout for me is Ismael Cruz Cordova, who plays Arondir. Again, probably mispronouncing some of those. There's also two dwarfs played by Owen Arthur and Sophia Nomavet, and they both play a prince and princess, and they are so good in this. When you get to see them in episode 2, they are fantastic, and I can't wait to dive more into that culture and everything in there, specifically in the world and the landscape that you get to see, and a lot of that goes to the scope. This is a show that fires on all cylinders when it comes down to characters, story, the scope of all, the vastness of this world, and you really get a look for every single thing in here. So I am very impressed with the show overall. I loved the first 2 episodes of The Rings of Power. Again, the next few episodes could be absolute dog shit and some of the worst stuff we've ever seen, but if we're just going off this sample, this is incredible. I cannot wait to see the rest of the season, and I cannot wait to see your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. So thank you so much again for watching this. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, as well as comment down below your guys' thoughts. And of course, guys, make sure to leave your favorite Lord of the Rings characters so far in the entire world of The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, or maybe if you've already watched this show, let me know who your favorite is from here. But thank you so much again for watching this, and of course, until next time, stay classy.